about you and about the call of faith, about my role in the world. But he's kind of saying, in this moment, it's not enough just to know the principles and just to know the rules. He says, but if you are pleased with me, teach me your ways so that I may know you. And what Moses is asking for is not just a download of divine information. He's asking for God to come to him and to lead him through the ins and outs of guiding this ragtag nation of Israel to the land of promise. When Moses prays, that I may know you, it means experience the intimate presence in the context of their life. Moses is asking for God's presence to join him. Because that is what we need when we face something that we find completely beyond our capability. When we're lost and confused and frustrated. In those times, we don't need another truth. We don't need another saying. We don't need another anecdote or another quote. What we need is the presence of God with us, to be beside us. We need a presence that will comfort us, a presence that will give us the ability to go forward. And so wonderfully, the Lord responds in verse 14. My presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. God affirms his presence to Moses and for the people of Israel, that despite the manner in which they departed from the covenant, despite their glaring mistake, God acts in mercy, and he declares that his presence will remain with his people. Despite that sin of the golden calf, and if you think about it, the golden calf, that kind of episode, that was a complete denial of at least 3 of the 10 commandments in one shot. And yet, God remains, because that's who God is. If you jump down and look at verse 19, God declares to Moses, I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will show you who I am. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on those whom I will have compassion. This is spoken as kind of a description of what the name of the Lord means. If you remember, when you're reading the Old Testament and you see the word Lord in capitalized letters, it's referring to the Hebrew word often translated Yahweh. And that is often translated as I am. More intricately, Yahweh it has this nuance of I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. I will do what I will do. So God here says, I will proclaim my name to you, what it means, who I am. I will have mercy on who I have mercy, and I will have compassion. And I find it quite interesting that when God discloses kind of this description of who he is, there's no words of judgment. There's no words of condemnation. There's no words of calling Israel to account. Just mercy. Just compassion. Of course, we know that through 40 years of wandering in the desert, Israel continually faced consequences of their actions, and we all do. We can't deny that. Having God in our life doesn't make our life rainbows and roses and a blissful experience forevermore. This doesn't deny it. But when we step away from God, what happens is we feel the absence, we feel the isolation, not because God has up and left, but because we have stepped outside the boundaries of our relationship with God. There's this saying that is often found on church billboards. If God seemed miles away from you, who moved? Who moved? The truth remains that God's presence is always for us. God's constant presence is a presence of mercy and compassion. God is there to continually call us back into the knowledge and the experience of his presence. Because that is who we are to be. That is what defines us as people of faith. God's presence that walks with us. And that's what Moses says. Moses says that it's the presence of God that defines the people of Israel. It is God's presence that walks with them, that discloses them as the people that God liberated. And so how could God not go with them? If you are someone for whom God has created, if you are someone cast in his own image, if you are someone redeemed by his own saving act, then how could God's presence not be for you and go with you through the nitty-gritty of your life? So in response, Moses asks for the full display of God's presence. Show me your glory. And again, marvelously, God responds. Moses is given a glimpse of God's presence in the fullest manner that he can have. He doesn't see the whole divine brilliance of God in his sheer divinity. Moses is protected, and he views it partially. But he does view God's presence in life. You know, it's kind of very akin to the vision of Jesus being transfigured before Peter, James, and John. How the glory of Jesus Christ shines through the veil of his fleshly humanity. If you think of it, it's kind of like the cross, where we see what the glorious presence of God truly means for our lives, for each and every one of us. Where we see the need to have God with us in life, in the hard, in the horrible, in the frightful, and the frustrating, where we see where that is worked out to all of its extreme. Where we see the full embodiment of God's promise to Moses, my presence will go with you, and I will give you rest. This reading, Exodus chapter 33, is fabulously comforting for all of us. Because Israel had just embarked on the Exodus. They've just embarked on their life of faith, and they fouled up horribly. And if there was any reason that God would just write them off, it was pretty much going to be in this moment. Yet almost shockingly, God remains. God remains with the people, and he acts in mercy and compassion for them. So the people of Israel, they leave that mountain, and they continue on in their journey, set firmly in God's presence with them. This truth of God's nature, the truth revealed in Moses' conversation with the Lord, is brought about because Moses felt the need to ask for God's presence. It's the same truth today. Do you feel like you are up against something big? Do you feel like you are up against some complex algebraic equation of faith that you just can't figure out? Do you feel confused as to what the way forward might be in life? Is there fear? Is there frustration? Maybe a little bit of anger? Take a page from Moses. Ask for God's presence to be revealed to you. None of us are ever alone in this world. None of us are divinely abandoned. The time for God's intimate presence with his people, with the people he loves and guides, that has not ended. And though it might shock you, God's presence for you is a presence of mercy, compassion, and rest. Whatever the nitty and the gritty of your life happens to be, he is there. Just ask to see his presence. Amen.